For nearly 3 decades, the brutal slaying of young Geelong, Australia mother Annette Stewart remained shrouded in mystery. Her lifeless body was discovered in her bedroom in 1992, a cold case that seemed destined to remain unsolved until an unexpected twist in the investigation of another more recent slaying brought new hope. In the early 1990s, Annette Stewart, a vibrant 29-year-old mother of 2, was a beloved member of the Geelong West community. Annette worked at the Winchester factory in Point Henry, where she was known for her cheerful demeanor and hardworking nature. She had a wide circle of friends and was deeply involved in the social life of Geelong West. Annette was described by her friends and family as full of life, always smiling, and willing to lend a helping hand to anyone in need. Her home on Hope Street was a hub of activity, often filled with laughter and the comforting aroma of tea, as she entertained friends and neighbors. As a single mother, Annette was dedicated to providing a loving and stable home for her children, 13-year-old Jacinta and 10-year-old Erin. She balanced her responsibilities with grace, ensuring her children felt supported and loved, despite the challenges of raising them alone. On March 16, 1992, Annette started her day early, heading to her job at the Winchester factory in Point Henry. After finishing her shift around 4:30 p.m., Annette made a few stops in Geelong to run some errands and make purchases. These routine activities were part of her everyday life and gave no inclination of the horrors that were to come. By early evening, Annette returned to her home on Hope Street. That evening, she invited 4 friends over for tea and to help her fix her television. After they left, Annette prepared for a quiet night at home. But 2 days later, a friend, David Grant, noticed her car was still parked in the driveway, an unusual sight that raised immediate concern. This friend decided to check on Annette, entering the house, only to be met with a horrifying scene. Inside, he discovered Annette's naked body in her bedroom. The home, once a haven of safety and joy, had become the site of a horrific crime. An autopsy would later reveal that Annette had been brutally strangled, a cruel and senseless act that cut her vibrant life short just weeks before her 30th birthday. In the days following the discovery of her body, Geelong West was gripped by shock and grief. The brutal nature of her demise sent ripples through the community. Victoria Police quickly launched an extensive investigation. Detectives meticulously combed through Annette's home, searching for any clues that might lead to the perpetrator. They interviewed neighbors, friends, and anyone who had been in contact with Annette in the days leading up to her tragic end. The fact that there were no signs of forced entry suggested that Annette might have known her attacker. This theory guided the initial phase of the investigation. Police collected various pieces of evidence from the crime scene, including hair fibers and other forensic materials. One of the primary suspects was a co-worker of Annette's from the Winchester factory. This individual had been named by a coroner as a prime suspect in 2007. But despite being questioned, no charges were brought against him. This suspect, along with several others, was scrutinized thoroughly, but each lead seemed to fizzle out without yielding any concrete results. The community was cooperative, and Annette's friends and family were desperate for answers. Despite the best efforts of the detectives, the investigation began to stall. The absence of modern forensic technology and the lack of substantial evidence made it increasingly difficult to pinpoint the person responsible for the heinous crime. As the months turned into years, Annette's case gradually went cold. By the mid-2000s, it had joined the ranks of many other unsolved cases in Victoria Police's cold case files. Although the original investigators had exhausted all known avenues, Annette's family and friends never gave up hope for justice. In 2015, police offered a $1 million reward for information leading to a resolution in Annette's case. This reward brought in a flurry of tips and renewed public interest, but ultimately failed to produce any actionable evidence. The case remained open but inactive, with detectives waiting on any new information that might break the case open. Then, after nearly 3 decades of unanswered questions, the breakthrough in Annette Stewart's case came from an unexpected source. It began with a phone call that reignited hope and set in motion a series of events that would lead to the end of one of Victoria's most perplexing cold cases. In 2019, Victoria Police received a tip-off that would prove pivotal. The caller claimed that the person responsible for taking Annette Stewart's life in 1992 was 56-year-old Darren Chalmers. The caller revealed to the police that Chalmers' brother, Jamie, had once confided in him that Darren Chalmers had confessed. Chalmers was working as a gardener with a history of substance abuse, living in Perth, Western Australia. Chalmers was no stranger to the initial investigators of Annette's case. He had admitted to being inside her home on the day she was fatally attacked, but there was insufficient evidence to charge him at the time. Air fibers collected from the crime scene and retested by cold case detectives yielded a faint DNA match to Chalmers. While this evidence was not strong enough to be used as definitive evidence in court, it confirmed his presence at the scene and renewed the investigators' determination. Fueled by this new development in a case that had long gone cold, Victoria Police collaborated with law enforcement in Western Australia to devise a plan to bring Chalmers to justice. Undercover operatives spent months ingratiating themselves with Chalmers, slowly gaining his trust. Their efforts paid off in January 2020, when Chalmers, believing he was among friends, finally confessed to violently ending Annette Stewart's life. He said that he was one of the people invited to drink tea at her house, as he was friends with the man Annette dated at the time. He left after 45 minutes but came back hours later, saying he had no one to celebrate his birthday with and asking to come in. His birthday was a day earlier. Annette agreed, and they drank a bit before she said he could spend the night on her couch. An hour later, he rose, took Annette's life by bashing her head 3 times with an iron before strangling her with a cord. He then left by the back door. During the same period, he also admitted to another eerily similar crime, the slaying of Dianne Barrett, who had been missing since May 2019. Dianne Barrett, a 60-year-old retired music teacher, was known for her kind spirit and love toward others. Living in Medina, a suburb of Perth, she often extended her generosity to her neighbors. Chalmers, who lived just 2 doors down on Ridley Way, was one such neighbor who had benefited from her compassion. On the evening of May 12, 2019, Dianne invited Chalmers to her home for a meal. After dinner, she accompanied him to his house for a cup of tea. The friendly visit took a dark turn when Chalmers, without any provocation, launched a brutal attack. He jumped on Dianne and used an iron bar across her neck, pressing down with both knees to choke her. The attack lasted for 3 excruciating minutes. After Dianne's senseless demise, Chalmers showed no remorse or respect for her remains and dumped her body in a remote bushland southeast of Perth. To cover his tracks, Chalmers meticulously cleaned his home, wiping away any evidence of the crime. Dianne's disappearance was reported by concerned neighbors when they noticed her dog locked inside her house without food or water, her lights and television still on. This was completely out of character for Dianne, who was last seen alive at a local Bunnings store buying flowers for her elderly mother. Her sudden disappearance and the subsequent discovery of her dog heightened fears for her safety. The investigation into Dianne's case intensified over the following months. In January 2020, during the undercover operation targeting Chalmers, he led police to the location of Dianne's remains. Because of the advanced state of decomposition, she had to be identified through dental records. The exact cause that ended her life could not be determined by forensic pathologists, but Chalmers' confession provided the necessary details to piece together the tragic events of that night. In January 2021, Darren Chalmers pleaded guilty to his involvement in the Dianne Barrett case. He was sentenced to life imprisonment and must serve at least 20 years before being eligible for parole. During court proceedings, details about Chalmers' troubled past, which allegedly played a significant role in shaping his violent tendencies, were revealed. Born and raised in Victoria, Chalmers was made a ward of the state during his teenage years. During this vulnerable period, he suffered assault and abuse at the hands of both men and women, leaving him with deep-seated feelings of anger and rage, particularly towards women. This background of abuse and emotional turmoil seemed to manifest in violent behavior throughout his life. Justice Stephen Hall, who presided over the case, described the slaying of Dianne Barrett as an unprovoked episode of extreme violence. While acknowledging that Chalmers' substance abuse and troubled past might provide context for his actions, it did not serve as an excuse. On November 29, 2023, Chalmers returned before the Supreme Court for a pre-sentence hearing on the Annette Stewart case. The court was told Chalmers had written a one-page letter in which he asked never to be released and requested a non-parole period of 40 years, stating, "I think I deserve it." Victorian Director of Public Prosecutions, Carrie Judd KC, said Chalmers told the court he took the two women's lives believing he would secure a significant financial benefit for himself. Chalmers was handed another life sentence for taking the life of Annette Stewart and ordered to serve a single non-parole period of 36 years for both slayings. He will be in his 90s before he is eligible for parole, ensuring that he remains behind bars for the majority, if not the entirety, of his life. The cases of Annette Stewart and Dianne Barrett are forever linked by their perpetrator, Darren Chalmers. The dedicated efforts of cold case detectives using undercover operations were key in solving these crimes, allowing the families of Annette Stewart and Dianne Barrett to find solace in the justice served. Annette's two children, Jacinta Martin and Aaron Stewart, told the court their lives were ripped apart when their mother's life was taken, leaving them feeling like a burden on their families. Outside the court, Jillian Stewart, Annette's sister, expressed relief over the sentencing, stating, "It is nearly 32 years we have been waiting for this result. Knowing he can never do this to anyone else, this is wonderful."